According to Crowley, one can contact these higher intelligences by becoming one with them. That is, by metamorphing into man-gods, or supermen. This was Crowley's primary goal, attainable in his beliefs through the ancient systems of the Hebrew and Greek Kabbalah and other forms of metaphysical, quote, science. All practitioners of magic, philosophically based occultists such as the Theosophists or Freemasons, have been consumed with interest of finding the origins of the human race. You just have to read what they write. It is claimed by the founders of many of these secret orders that they have received guidance from direct contact with those who call themselves the secret chiefs of the great white brotherhood. These masters, we are told, have literally dictated the laws and agendas of these mystery schools of ancient thought and wisdom. Now, Crowley, in the latter part of the last century and the beginning of this, the 20th, claimed to have had many such indescribable contacts, but two were of the greatest importance in apparently redirecting his entire life and thus changing the face of modern magic for all who followed. And as astonishing as it may seem, it may be that almost a century ago, Crowley was given a revelation about things that are coming to pass, even as we speak here tonight. The first contact that Crowley relates was in April of 1904 in Cairo. Cairo, by the way, is Seleucid Arabic for Mars. Crowley tells us that he encountered an entity who he considered to be his, quote, holy guardian angel. This entity identified himself as Aiwass and proceeded to dictate to Crowley the so-called Book of the Law, or what would eventually become, to some, the canon of 20th century magical practice. In this book, Aiwass decrees that, quote, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And then he goes on to say, and I am a god of war and vengeance. I want to get something up here. I am a god of war and vengeance. Choose ye an island and fortify it. Dung it about with enginery of war. I will give you a war engine. And with it you shall smite the people, and none shall stand before you. I am the warrior lord of the 40s. Remember, this was channeled by Crowley in 1904. The last statement is astonishing and quite prophetic, considering it was dictated 40 years before World War II and 93 years before the revelations you have seen this evening, 93 being the number of the Book of the Law. But more about that significance later. Aiwass also gave Crowley a code, a cipher, which is being used by some ufologists in their continuing efforts to decode some UFO contactee experiences. And I have no experience whatever with the use of that, so it's merely part of the record. Here's where things get very curious. Parsons' wife and magical partner, Marjorie Cameron, stated in 1953, in a book written by the successor to Crowley after Parsons kind of blew up, as we will discuss in a moment, stated in 1953 that she believed that the war engine referred to by Aiwass was none other than the flying saucer. That it would one day bring her back home to Mars, which she believed was somehow her birthplace, thus escaping a future perilous event destined for Earth. This, of course, speaks to the Phoenix theme, so prevalent in Crowleyan lore. This perilous event, according to Crowley, was to usher in the secret eon, or secret ion, depending upon how you spell it, thought to be embedded in humanity, which could be prematurely, before the actual predicted date, made manifest for the initiated through ritual sex magic. Now, one of the curious things that David Oates, when we did the presentation up in Pasadena, withheld until I kind of forced him to put it on the table, was that a lot of the backwards reverse speeches of the NASA JPL Pathfinder team have to do with sex with the rocks. It's on the tapes. We are told that Tibet is where these masters of the Great White Brotherhood, also called the Himalayan Brotherhood, originate. In this mythology, the Aryan race itself is also believed to have come from the mountains of Tibet, lying at 33 degrees north latitude. Strange but true, Roswell, the UFO crash in 1947, Mount Palomar, the largest post-war observatory, Rancho Santa Fe, Heaven's Gate, White Sands, the first A-bomb test, Nagasaki, Japan, the second A-bomb dropped, and Baghdad, Iraq, highlight, of course, of the Gulf War, and Phoenix, Arizona, the Phoenix Lights moving across the city at 19.5 degrees, and Dallas, site of the Kennedy assassination, are all at 33 degrees. Incidentally, Santiago, Chile, which lies at 33 south, where the anomalous NASA UFOs on the STS-80 video were initially filmed, is also apparently an interesting part of this pattern, which we'll lay out in more detail when we produce the video. The word Aryan, incidentally, comes from the word Aries, which is the first sign of the Western astrological zodiac, ruled, of course, by Mars. There are many legends concerning Tibet that speak of a race of supermen inhabiting this region on Earth, a legend which many German intelligentsia and pre-World War II occult societies, like the Thule Society, which Hitler was a member of, adhered to. Unbeknownst to most of the world today, the founders of the Nazi Party, starting with Hitler himself, were steeped in these occult traditions and were profoundly influenced by the teachings of the secret Thule Society, whose demonstrably racist ideologies were a warped version of theosophy and ancient German mythology. By the time of Hitler's rise, most of pre-World War II European occult traditions were dominated by the magical system that Crowley painstakingly created. And Hitler himself was envious of Crowley's infamy as the most evil man in the world, as well as his magical prowess. Hitler said this in several volumes, including one called Hitler Speaks. Crowley claims that his second otherworldly encounter, which resulted in an even more profound influence on his work in magic, occurred at Montauk, Long Island in New York in 1918. This entity introduced himself as Lamb, which Crowley was quick to point out meant pathmaker, pathfinder, in the Tibetan language. It is from this word that Lam-as of Tibet are so called. The lamb was also the ancient symbol for Aries, Mars, as well as the resurrected god, Tammuz, Osiris, Christ, etc. Rising from the ashes, Crowley drew an effigy of lamb, which eerily represents the popular modern image of an alien some half a century later. And somewhere I have an image, and I can't call it up because it's not on here. It's in hard copy, and we don't have a way to show those. Lamb told Crowley a story about Mars. All right? I need to change something here. That should do. All right? Lamb told Crowley a story about Mars, the fifth Sephiroth in the Hebrew tree of life, by the way, concerning a lotus flower, a three-petaled Pathfinder lander, perchance, symbolic of hyperdimensional physics, looking at a mountain peak which had sharp edges where something sits and shines like the sun on water. He said it was a seed waiting to be born. This story is also related in the earlier Book of the Law as dictated by Aiwass, where it is written that, quote, there will be a reward of Ra-Hur-Kuit, an aspect of Horus, the babe in the egg, waiting to be reborn, whose number is 97. What year is this? Now, someone asked me before, and I'll need you to speak up. They came up to me and said, do you remember the reverse speech part of David's analysis of the press conference?